Good afternoon and welcome back to another rendition of the B&H virtual event space. It's a Sony double header today. We just had Sony artisan of imagery Bob Christ talking about different lenses for different uses. And now we welcome my man, Sony artisan of imagery Chris Orwig, in to talk about Sony Magic, this light, powerful, compact Sony lens trio. Chris, what's going on, man?
Derek, not much. Good to see you. Good to hang out. I love getting these opportunities to chat. And yeah, I'm going to talk about these three little powerhouse lenses, and then hopefully make it relevant for those of you who are interested in just different focal lengths or compact cameras in general. So it's specific, but not overly specific, if that makes sense. You know me, I always like to broaden it and talk about sometimes kind of the deeper things, because like specific stuff, yeah, but then what about how do we think about things? You know, not just one lens, but lenses, not just one focal length, but what is focal length? Anyway, so that's what we'll chat about
I
a
love
little
it.
bit.
That's why I love having you on, Chris, because it's never look, we can go online and we can get the specs, right? And we can go on
Yeah,
YouTube and we can
that's
get
easy.
all different kinds of reviews. But we look at your work. I say this every time we have you on, huge fan of your work. And I love to hear about the decisions and why you choose a particular lens, why these lenses are great for what you do. There's a million choices out there. Why this one? So
Right.
love having you on. You know, we were just talking about it before we went live. We love the sociological aspect, the psychological aspect behind photography. And that doesn't just relate to our subjects, it does relate to the gear we choose. And really, it's about
Yeah.
an experience, wanting gear that we want to use. And sometimes the best lens for what we want to use is something that's just easy to carry around. So that's why we're
Yeah.
here. Always great having
Yeah.
Chris, and a huge thank you also to Sony for sponsoring today. Sony sponsored both of our events today. So a huge thank you to them for
Cool.
putting on some great content for us. I'm going to turn it over to Chris, go tuck myself in the corner. And of course, if you guys do have any questions, we'd love to hear them, love to get them answered for you. If you're joining us from Vimeo, live stream, Facebook, you can drop them right in the comment section. And if you're right at here on Zoom, we have that lovely Q&A module. You can drop your questions right in there. Chris, floor is yours.
All right, let's do it. Just to kind of highlight the lenses and the kind of the camera setup, and I'll pull up some slides of these little guys, and they are incredibly compact, you know, a couple in one hand. And then I pair those with the Sony A7C, but just kind of wanted to give that visual to kind of give context. And then let me share my screen and let me then launch this little deck here. Oops, let me do one thing. I have to unplug a second monitor for this to work better. Forgot about that. Now, hopefully that's looking good. How is that, Derek? We good?
Looking great.
Okay, great. And this particular image that we used for this one is captured with one of those lenses. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I want to just do a little mini intro myself. I am a photographer. I'm an author. My most recent book's called Authentic Portraits, so I really value authenticity. I am an athlete. I love hiking, biking, surfing, swimming, getting in the outdoors. Family man. I have 3 daughters, 2 dogs, chickens, you name it. But I just mentioned all of that because that does affect the gear that I use. And this is an image capture with one of these lenses. It's the 24mm lens. This lens I love, so I like just capturing things when I'm walking around. This is a pier near where I live. I'm in Santa Barbara. This is a photograph of a friend. And these images now aren't with all 3 lenses, but I'm just kind of showing you stuff I shoot. This was a shoot I had last week. Derek, I mentioned this one where I was photographing Gabby Reese on the right and her husband, Laird Hamilton, on the left. And so I do commercial work. And these are 2 other images from that same day. We really were showcasing like, how do we photograph the different roles that she plays as a leader, as a podcaster, as an athlete. So that was a really fun shoot. Also as a mom, here she is in her home in front of all these kind of fun family photographs. I'll photograph actors, models, strangers. I really just love the human connection. I like getting past the surface. And I'm mentioning kind of all this because it does tie into this type of gear and lenses. This is a wedding. I'll do occasional weddings, friends, Sometimes I do some work in the studio. I really love natural and available light, and um, that's a little bit about me. So today, I'm we're focusing in our conversation about this trio of lenses. There's the 24 2.5, 40 2.5, and then the 50 2.8. And when I first got these lenses, I was a little bit disappointed because they were so small, and I was like, "What? I can't. Is this it?" So I'm so used to using, big, heavy, not heavy gear. I mean, Sony gear is pretty light, but let's say my 50 1.2 is much bigger than this 50 2.8. And so, but then I decided I would go out and shoot, and as I started to shoot with them, I realized there was this magic hidden within these lenses, which is this ability to be really, really nimble, really versatile, and just capture stuff in, I don't know if it's the right word, but kind of a more casual way. So these are some photos from the 24. And what I'm going to do is share some photos and then a little bit of story, and then eventually I'll go to Lightroom as well. But this was the very first image I captured with the 24, and it wasn't great. But so kind of rewinding a little bit, so this is the pier. I'm like, I'll go to the pier, take a picture. Then you kind of realize like, oh, right. Even though it's a good lens, it doesn't make you a good photographer. So then you have to do the work. So I was like, well, let me get closer to the pier. So then I got closer, and then I thought, okay, well, I know what I need to do. This lens is allowing me to see a lot of the scene. I need to get on the pier, stand up, and then I need to think about my camera height and my horizon line and really, the moment, and then drop into that. And then I went out, those first couple of shots, I was waiting for this model who was late for the shoot. But then I went out and did a shoot and went to this old kind of greenhouse area, these greenhouses that weren't being used right nearby the beach there. And I loved kind of the lines, I love that wider angle perspective. And with that perspective, for me, I find camera height really makes a big difference. Here's another shoot I did out on the sand dunes, and I'll show some more images from these. This one works up close portraits as well as those more environmental portraits. Now we're flipping to the 40. This I went to a friend's little shop and was kind of thinking, well, what if I were to just capture some stuff for her and her business, kind of small business photo shoot. So I captured some detail stuff of that. I captured some portraits of her out in front of her shop, a couple different looks there, and then in front of a wall up close. And if we were to zoom in, I can't right now because I'm in Keynote, but the detail in the eyes, the sharpness, the depth of field, the way it renders color and contrast and all that magic. So then I did a shoot with the 50, a different location, same person we saw earlier, and wanted to put that one through the paces and wanted to see, like with this photograph, like how close can I get and still get a really natural look. And 50, I love that focal length. 50 and 40 are so close. So it was kind of like, okay, what are these differences? Environmental portraits in context. And then that one on the right, which I love, which was it was in front of this white wall. And there was a wall across the street reflecting like back in, but it's one of my favorite portraits. And it was able to capture it, I think, because we were just walking through a parking lot, and I just said, hey, what if you stand there, take a breath, close your eyes, open your eyes, and then capture the moment. And what was interesting is she didn't even really feel like we were doing a photo shoot because the gear was really so small. And so that kind of led me to realize, like, okay, the compactness of this, the quality, versatility, and then this fun factor, this playfulness, this new kind of way of shooting really opened up just something new for me. And so I'll do my stop share and kind of come back to camera for a moment. And let's just see. Am I back, Derek? We're back.
Yep, you're back.
See me okay? Cool. And I think I'll just pause right there because I'm sure you're going to have some insightful question. You always do, Derek. I can also go back to sharing images as well, but I thought that's a good kind of healthy little intro to the whole concept.
Well, you know what? I actually do. I'm hoping it's insightful, but like I said, we had Bob Christ on right before you, and we were talking about how it's always been the thing of you go for the heaviest, most expensive, most talked about G Master glass, and you kind of just
Yeah.
discard everything else. It's like almost like that is the pinnacle, and that's the only place you should aspire to go as far as a lens is concerned. I feel like there's been a transition and a shift, especially in professional photographers, because we all fall victim to it. It's like, well, for a long time it was if you're doing a professional job, you're not going to show up to shoot Gabby Reese 10 years ago without having the absolute top professional gear that you have in your kit, right? Now I feel like we've reached a place where you can go grab anything in that line, anything in that alpha line, and go shoot any job, and you're going to feel just as confident as you would shooting it with an alpha 1 with 24 to 70, the version 2. So I guess the introspective part is, number one, am I completely crazy? Am I just speaking in terms that you don't understand right now? Or and number two, you know, is this your go-to? I mean, if you're just going out running down the beach, are you more likely now to grab something from the trio than grabbing your biggest, heaviest, most professional setup?
Yeah, and let me see. I'm gonna just grab one camera behind me. Let me
You got some
reach
hardware
down
back
here.
there.
I got some gear here. Yeah. So in this case, let's say we're at the Sony A1, and this is 24 to 70. We've talked about that one before, but and then just kind of our comparison. Let me try to hold this a little better so we can see size, because I think I mean, you're onto something. Obviously, this isn't a fixed focal length lens, but we get the idea as far as your build and in impact, and even in regards to the lens strap. I love. Have you ever used these? The Peak Design
Oh, love it.
lens. Love this whole system. So I have this
Quick
little
release.
teeny lens strap, and I always think of the width of the lens strap. This is the one I would use on the like on the A1 or A7R too, because you want a thicker strap for heavier equipment. So this little teeny lens strap, these little teeny lenses. I first went out when I first went to shoot with these. I was like, I don't even have a camera bag that these fit in, because I don't need a camera bag. And so I just put one lens in my pocket. I haven't done that for forever. And then I hired a model, and it was a real shoot. And she was just kind of like, where's all your stuff? And I was like, it's like, I have a little sweatshirt on, like even right now, I'm like, wait, here's my stuff. This is it. And she was like, okay. And so then what it did is it created a different kind of space and a different rhythm and a different flow. And, I know from my friends who are journalists and who really work journalistically, and they're kind of quiet and nimble, and you don't know when they're taking pictures. That's hard to do if you have an A1 and big glass. People, when you bring out the big one, big gun, so to speak, people say, wow. When I would walk around with this camera, they're like, oh, what is that? Is that a film camera? No. And they would be like, oh, kind of like, that's cute, or that's cool, or just it was all of a sudden, it was non-threatening. And even when that one portrait, which I love, that one portrait, the white wall one, there's people walking around, but they didn't think we're doing, like, no one would have said, this guy's going to make one of his favorite images of his entire life. But I had to change my mindset and say, yeah, I think I might, because I know enough about light. I know about creating a moment, connecting with someone, boom, and let's do that. So your question was, is it go-to gear? And the answer is no. In the same way that nothing's a go-to gear, it's more about the situation. So Gabby Reese, who I photographed, has been modeling for, since she was, she's 50 something, since she was like 16. So decades. And she's so good in front of the camera, and so easy, and so hospitable, and so gracious, and so strong, and so, everything. So for someone like that, gear is almost irrelevant. They can handle whatever gear you have, whatever kit you have, whoever's on set. They're just like, they're professionals, right? But when you're photographing someone like my friend in their shop, and I'm just kind of walking around her shop, having that small kit is the go-to choice, right? So it's the choice isn't so much one and done. I'm only going to do one thing, and that's all I'm ever going to do. But more really thinking, being adaptable. Does that make sense a little bit?
Totally, totally.
And also adaptable, and for me at least, let's say I have to say I'm going to the beach, like you had mentioned. I'd much rather bring this camera and this small lens. And then if I have to leave it in the car, I'm more okay with that. So the whole point of it is I could bring this camera to places that are more precarious. I don't know how we define that. Um, I'm not as worried about the gear, or go to dinner and I just set it on the table, or have it in a little, like, again, this camera setup's so small. I found all my camera bags were too big. So once I ended up using this little like lunch container. It was like a little lunch sack thing where you would put like your, it was perfect though. Had a little strap, and I was like, this is great. But the point with that being is but it's all small and compact, but crazy powerful, crazy good quality. And then I think too, because it isn't, I know I'm talking a lot here, but I was thinking, when you grab your big camera, for me, it's a little bit of a serious endeavor. This is very playful. Even like that pier shot, I was like, I'll shoot the pier. The model's late. Why not? I was like, I'll walk around, and it's like, wow, this is kind of fun. I haven't done this for years. So it brought some of that fun factor into the mix. And then maybe I'll flip it back to you just to make this a little agnostic, not to brand specific. But do you find that same thing when you're working with smaller gear?
Dude, I was just gonna make the analogy of, you ever go out and it's all in our heads, right? A lot of it
Right.
is, it's in our heads. When I go out, if I take my son to the park, if I wear jeans and a pair of Vans, I
Yeah.
don't feel, if my son wants to go run around in the grass, I'm gonna be like, nah, I'm not really, like, I'm just gonna stay here. Now, if I go
Yeah.
there and I'm wearing gym shorts and running shoes, we're climbing trees, we're in the bushes. Now, can I go climb trees and jump in the bushes and run around in the grass in jeans and Vans? Of course I can. But it's my
Yeah.
mindset. I'm going out there with the intention. So I think hopefully that translates. When I go out with a light setup, I'm having fun. I'm not weighed down. I'm not worrying about my shoulder, my back. When you go out with that serious five, six, $7,000 setup, you feel like, well, I'm just out here to take pictures, but no, nothing's good enough. I need to be in a studio, or I need to have like an actual plan. When I throw that easy, light, and swing it around on my back kind of setup, like an A7C with the trio, that type of setup,
Yeah.
you're going out with the intention of, you know what? I'm going to have fun. It's not weighing me down. If I see something I like, I'm going to shoot it. If not, then whatever. But I think it's more about the mindset. And I think that's where, when you and I start talking, we always start on gear, and then we always get off into
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the brain and how we look at it. But I think that's as much the experience as the gear, right? You want to use gear that makes you want to go out and take pictures, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. You can have the
Yeah.
greatest setup for whatever situation, could have all the latest and greatest tech in it, but if you don't want to use it, what good is it doing on the shelf?
Right, right. Or if it's holding you back in some way. And I love the clothing analogy because, here I live in this little beach town, and it was 4th of July. So, of course, everyone and their brother was out at the beach. It was beautiful, wonderful. Picture California, perfect beach. And my daughter and I were sitting there under our umbrella, kind of laughing and playing. And these two people walked right along the edge of the water, and they were dressed in all black dress shoes, two men, and they could not have been more out of place. And it was just the funniest thing. We were just dying laughing. And you see that all the time. And I think what happens is sometimes people come to Santa Barbara or a beach town, and they don't think they're going to go to the beach. They end up going to the beach, but they're not dressed for it, right? And so they're just kind of like awkwardly walking around the sand. And I always think, just like kick your shoes off, people. Like, don't wear dress shoes in the sand. Just go barefoot for a moment. But I think, barefoot and free, that idea and that ability to have cameras that do that. And also for me, I mean, as a side note too, I was kind of jealous of, I was walking around seeing all these women with purses, and I was like, oh my gosh, if I had a purse, I could just have this in there, and then I could just pull it out whenever I need it. So I now have a bag, which is kind of like a man purse. I don't know what else to call it. Don't judge me, Derek. But I call it, my daughter calls it a satchel, to kind of
There
make
you
it
go.
cool.
So
Yeah.
you needed a special bag because it's that compact, and
It's that compact,
you're not
and
going to drag around a big messenger bag.
no, not even that's too much material. It's like the bag weighed more than the camera.
Yeah.
But so that, again, it's like going to the beach or going to the park, or, or even like climbing a tree. I have climbed a tree with this camera, and hanging on your back's no big deal. Or I've done stuff with kids because it's not even just as heavy and intrusive. It doesn't get in the way. And so that is really freeing. And of course, there's a point where you have to say, okay, then like how small should our camera be? Should it be like, I don't know, really teeny tiny or something? And because there is a point where a camera can be too small. I mean, this is kind of weird, but let's go there for a second, and I've, this one, I wrap my wrist around it like this. I have this great handhold on it, amazing viewfinder. And then the quality that comes out of it is phenomenal. I remember years ago, I bought this little Leica, and it was like a little toy digital camera. It was really small. So this is where I'm going with too small. And it took horrible pictures. It was really cute and funny. It was kind of gimmicky. And I don't know if you remember those cameras, but they were
Mm-hmm.
these little mini Leicas. And it was like, well, that's just too small. It's irrelevant. So it's like finding the right size. Like, let's go back to the kids going to the park, gym shorts maybe, or just shorts for that matter, that works. But if you had like a track sprint outfit on, you also wouldn't play with your kids. You just would feel so, or if, let's say I came back from a bike ride and I had like full bike gear on, like my kids make fun of me in that all the time, the Lycra type stuff. Like you can't hang out with people. You have to like go change. And so it's like finding that right, like casual mix, but yet still performance oriented. And then with this little secret that this could allow me to create the best images of my life. So that's the weird part for me. Remember I said I was kind of disappointed because they were so small, because I was like, oh, it's like so small. But then I realized, oh my gosh, it's so small. And
The
this
power,
is the power of it, right?
the power of it.
And so blending those two together, I think, is where if you can have that mindset and not say, oh, this is just my little travel rig, or, oh, this is cute, but realize, no, this is a real deal. And then when you go into post-production, you realize, oh, I can really push these images around, as far as recover highlights, or boost up the shadows, or have fun with the way you process them, and then zoom into them at 100, and you're like, oh my gosh. And then print them, and you say, oh my gosh, it holds up in every area. And then the question is, I mean, back to what you're saying is, why not shoot with it more often, And I think it's kind of, to me, because I've asked that, like, maybe I should just shoot with that, And I think it's almost like a musician and instruments. Musicians will have multiple guitars, and they just, well, I kind of feel a vibe of that one today, or like, let's say with Gabby, that one was like, no, I used my A1, my A7R4. Also in that case, I wanted, let's say I have a 16-35. I don't have that equivalent for this one. So, one of those decisions. Yeah.
Interesting.
But,
Interesting.
Yeah. What are your reflections on all that?
So I just had a reflection and it slipped my mind. See, look at that. You got me so like deep in my head here.
Yeah.
It was something in talking about the compact nature, and now I'm totally
It's okay.
slipping. It's
Should
a
we jump to
rare.
some images?
Yeah, let's jump to some images. I'm sure it's going to
Let's go
come
switch
back
some
to
images.
me. Let's
Enough
look.
talking.
Yeah.
We'll talk some more, but let me just jump into Lightroom here. And are we in Lightroom? You seen me?
Yes,
Pretty
sir.
good.
Good.
Okay, good. So I'm just going to kind of zoom in. I have a little collection where I did these 3 lenses in them, and some of these images we've seen. I'll just hit full screen so it's a little bit bigger, and we'll click through a few, and then others that we haven't seen. So get working up close, and then obviously adding like a stylistic look to it. experimenting with sitting stuff, leaning against things. This one, I love this one. I had her hold this leaf, and I climbed up a little higher, so that whole camera height kind of difference. This is now I'm closer and lower, so the wider angle lenses really give you that ability to sort of play in that way and work with environment. Now I'm even closer, kind of getting in real close here and doing some
I'm
vertical
going to
stuff.
be honest, Chris.
Yeah, yeah,
I would never even be able to. I couldn't tell you in looking at these images. I don't think
yeah,
anybody could confidently tell you what setup you were using. If you said,
not
"Look,
at
you have
all.
the entire
Yeah,
alpha line lenses," and I think that's what the main overarching point is, right? Is that
yeah,
there's a lot of people who get hung up on. They're always going to look for the negative. They're always going to be like, "Well, if it
yeah,
if it were the best, then it would be this." And we talked
yes,
about this with Bob in the last webinar and talking about best is relative. It's
yeah,
best for what I'm using it for, best for what type of photographer, what type of person, what type of situation. But if it just comes
exactly.
down to just quality and looking at these, and we're looking at it
Yeah,
over Zoom, I'm not even seeing
yeah,
the whole full
yeah,
resolution image. They're
yeah.
beautiful images.
Yeah, if you were here, that's why I was like, I wish we could, zoom in. I have this really big monitor, so my 100% zoom rate, we can't go in. We could go kind of 400 or something, but it's like when this is way past 100%. But the way the image quality holds up, the way when I printed these, same thing. Like if I grouped them in these little folders because I was like, wait a second, did I shoot this with something else? And literally, if we were to put these side by side with some of these other lenses, they're in the race. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Well, that's
Yeah.
where you lose it too, is okay, if we're looking at stuff on a phone, then
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can get away with it. But it's when you zoom it in and you start to see, okay, pixelation versus a nice crisp sharpness, nice lines or muddy
Yes.
shadows. And that's where you really see is when
Yeah.
you start, if you do pixel peak. Now I'm not a pixel peaker
Yes.
per se, but there are
Yeah.
people out there where it does matter to them. And you can't
Yeah.
discount, everybody has their own different strokes for different folks. Everybody has their own thing that they want in an image.
Right. Yeah. It's really true. Here I'm just kind of doing a before and after too, raw file, and then pushing the raw file around, having some fun with it, color and tones and mood, and all of that comes into play with these kind of lenses. I think that's part of it is, um, as well. You can't just, assume, okay, well, this is a really good lens. It is, but you have to still have that creative vision and explore what that could be. In this case, I'm gonna go full screen here a little bit. I'm kind of searching, like kind of trying to figure out the vision. I don't think I quite have it yet. I do like this one. I like this sort of walking. I wish I had
Beautiful.
dropped lower. Um, I wish her head was higher. A little. I'm probably like eye level, which is a mistake, I think. But either way, it's cool. I'm kind of experimenting. I'm testing, and that's what you do with these lenses like this. This is a friend. She owns a plant shop, so I had her bring one of her plants out there, and you can kind of see the processing in these. I've sort of played with a little bit and kind of have this bleached out sort of look in the sand dunes. But man, what a blast, and what a relief just to have a small camera with one lens and nothing on my back, and just to get out and play. And then the sand dunes, it's tricky because the sand, it's windy and it's always blowing sand kind of everywhere. And so to not be too worried about that was really nice as well. And I'll just kick out a full screen. Well, there's a lot more of the sand dunes. Her little cactus friend, she thought that was hilarious. She loved that.
Do you
Um,
make any? I'm curious. Do you make any in
yeah.
camera adjustments? Do you ever switch your color profile around or change anything in camera? Or is everything post?
Yeah, everything from me is post.
Okay.
So if we were to go, let's just kind of reset this one. Here it is. It's underexposed, and then I brought it up and kind of muted tones and colors out. But I just like it all afterwards. So
That's
I'm
your
just
look.
really, yeah,
That
yeah, yeah,
you do a nice like little bit desaturated. You can when I look at your like I've seen a lot of your shots, like the promo image for
Yeah.
this. You have
Yep.
like that nice kind of like washed out, but not like when I do it, it's people are like it's blown out and it's overexposed. But when you do it, it's like Vogue magazine. You have like such a nice control over it. Nope, nobody does highlights like Chris Orwig.
Well, I think part of it's cheating. I mean, the dynamic range of these cameras is crazy. I remember when I thought this is kind of a fun moment. Like the clouds are almost like wings, coming up.
Mhm.
But when I switched from another camera manufacturer to Sony, this was years ago. I remember my first uh, my first experience, my first moment kind of in post-production, because I spend a lot of time teaching and doing all this post-production stuff, so I know this stuff really well and do stuff with Adobe and blah blah blah. But I opened up the raw files and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of disappointed. And then I like started pushing a slider and I was like, wait, I'm not supposed to push a slider this far. Way like even like this one, like if we were to look at this, I mean, look at my highlight slider. It is all the way over. Can't go further over there, right? But I was just like, oh, that looks great. For that matter, you could just push. Yeah, yeah. Like that would look fine. You know what I mean? You could just push your sliders around a lot. So basically, that's because of the dynamic range of the sensor, and so I think that is part of it. And whatever brand or camera you work with, or what new, old, whatever it is, it's not necessarily about, back to our earlier conversation, saying like, well, I need the latest and greatest. It's about being really in tune with your own gear, your own lenses, your own camera, your own setup. And then also on the post-production side, shooting with that in mind. Because if I were shooting with a camera, maybe with not so much dynamic range, I would be a little more careful with my exposure. Or like that one that we talked about, the one that's kind of blown out with the girl in front of the wall. I would have shot that differently had I been using a different gear. So the whole point of, I think, a lot of this is, regardless of what gear you use, is really just getting to know it. And even doing like I'm doing here. I mean, again, not saying like I'm the greatest in the world or anything, but I do know a thing or two about getting a new lens, put it through its paces, do a real shoot, and I got to figure out, where does the lens fall apart? Where does it work well? Where does it not work well? This is my friend's shop. We saw some of those photos. Does it work well on just kind of detail stuff? Does it work well horizontal portraits, natural light, window light with some of the store lights on as well? Does it work well vertical? All of a sudden got a little closer there. Does it work? This is now with the 40. So the 40, you can have that closer working distance. And with the 40 and 50, when you get this close, there is slight distortion. Some purists might say I'm too close, but I like the sense of intimacy. Like if we really look at this one for a second, you feel like she cares about you, you care about her. You kind of have this like warm, natural, nice moment. And I love that. I think if we had an 85 or 70 to 200 here, well, 70 to 200, it wouldn't work because their shop's really small. But if I had an 85 and I had enough space to back up, it would be stronger probably, but not feel quite so intimate and warm, you know? So again, just iterating and just, I was a friend. This is a cool story. A friend of mine, he's a pro baseball player. He has this old Volvo. And he was like, Chris, can you like keep an eye on it for me for, it's like 4 or 5 months and just drive it around? And I was like, heck yeah, are you kidding me? It was great. And so I had it parked out front, and I always thought it'd be fun to do like a whole portrait series, like the back of the Volvo like this with different people sitting on it. But you just get the idea. I'm walking around, there's people around in all these situations, but they're kind of ignoring us because we're just sort of playing and goofing around a little bit. Black and white, color, you get the idea. But what this does for me with this kind of a focal length is it helps me say, okay, I got it. I can now use this lens. I now know this lens. It's a friend of mine, so to speak. And it delivers. And if I punch in, on any of these images, that's 400%. So probably going to look a little soft. But if we were to go to 100%, it's like tack sharp, like crazy perfect sharpness, smoothness, skin detail, everything, out of focus background, boom. I'm like, okay. And so I think that's maybe the takeaway, is whatever gear you have is doing like you would have to do back in the old school days in a photo school or something, is put it through its paces and really really learn it, like really know it, versus try to hope it works when you're in a pinch. So
It's
should I
that
keep going?
comfortability. It's that comfortability.
Yeah.
You should, your lens is going to be around with you way longer than your bodies. You're going to keep
Yeah.
those lenses through probably a couple bodies if it's a lens that you like and you use. So having that comfortability factor with all its nuances, not just you want to know how it focuses. If you have a lens that you have certain lenses, fortunately for you, I can't think of a Sony lens that has a technical issue with it. They
Yeah.
they're knocking it out of the
But
park. But when you go back into like using like
maybe focus is a little slower than the different lens, or different kind of focus,
exactly, right?
or different feeling that it helps render. I mean, all those things, like just being so aware of that,
Totally.
and that it's the subtlety. Because at the end of the day, photography, it's all subtlety. I think the what makes an image work or not work is it's it's not the big stuff, it's the little stuff, and it's a little gesture, it's a little moment, it's the little look, it's the little way um, the lens or light, or I don't know, all those things. That one didn't work, this one did. So that's but I maybe I included this one, or just probably randomly in there. I don't think I intentionally included it, but I always have my subjects close their eyes at some point. So I get them to breathe, I get them to close their eyes, and then I get these kind of moments. And that's a subtle moment. It's a different moment than like her modeling. It's more her, like, I forget what we were talking about, something deep and meaningful. She's from Russia, da da da. We talked about that. Take a breath, and then that connection moment.
Totally.
Experimenting. Just walking around town. She's really small there. Seeing how it does with the backlight we had. Again, you get the vibe. But
Mhm.
I don't know about for you, Derek, but how fun is this shoot?
It's dude, it's fun, it's loose, it's free. I was actually just going to ask you, once you get
Yeah.
out there and you settle in,
Yeah.
is gear even a thought at that point, or is it just,
Yeah.
oh,
It's
I'm in the zone?
Well, I mean, honestly, because this was my very, very first time with these lenses, these shoots, I was a, I didn't have the confidence, like, this is gonna, that, like at this moment, let's say with this shot, I did love this moment, but I wasn't sure, like, is the quality going to be there? And so I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go with it. But now when I shoot with these lenses, yeah, the gear melts away, disappears. It's not even about the gear. It doesn't even matter what the gear is. And then you just go in a moment and flow and figure it out. So yeah, that's definitely what happens for me, and just allowing yourself to be present. That mindfulness is so popular for a reason. I think it's about presence, it's about connection, it's about engagement, it's about just like being in this little teeny moment. And in photography, it is really all of these moments. And
I mean, that's
how
what
we
sets your work apart, is you do think about the moment, and really that's what you're doing. You're capturing a moment. You're bringing somebody back to that moment. You're showing somebody what you saw at that moment, and that's where the power is. The power is, how many times have you taken an image where you see something and it just has like this certain quality, and you
Yeah.
try to capture it and you're like, that's not it. Like, I don't feel, and looking at the image on the back of my camera, I don't feel like that's what I saw. And that's where the power is, problem solving, saying, well, why, if I see it and that's what I feel when I see it, why can't I capture it? What am I doing wrong? Or what do I need to do to capture it so that when somebody else looks at the image, they're taken back to that moment. And I think you do that very well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the maybe the reason why I am able to do that well is because that's what I'm searching for. And I do think we find what we look for. So the age old thing, kind of go nerdy here a little bit, but the brain, the reticular activator, it allows us to pay attention to certain things or allows us to find certain things. And I remember as a kid, I think you and I have talked about this before, but my brother and I got a Jeep. And once I drove that Jeep, all of a sudden I saw all these other Jeeps around and I would wave to the other people driving Jeeps. I didn't know I mean, they were always there. Just my brain didn't allow me to see or notice them. Same thing if we were teaching a workshop, which we need to do someday, and we said, hey, everyone go out and photograph, you know, the letter S. All of a sudden you would see S's everywhere, or photographed color blue or whatever, because we're allowing ourselves, we're telling our brain, this is something of value to us. Let's try to find this thing. And then we find it. Right. And I think that's part of the trick with portraiture photography in general is really not, is getting past the gear, is not just limiting yourself to what's there, but just saying, okay, what I'm really searching for, and you said it so well, was this moment. And I want this moment to be something that can be experienced, can be felt, can be can have impact on someone who isn't with me right now. And so I'm thinking through to that person. And maybe to tie another goofy analogy is I've done a lot of tutorials, online tutorials, and I'm just going to click around some images so it's visually interesting maybe while we're talking. And when you do these tutorials, I remember someone early on told me, they said, when you're just kind of talking to a screen, it can feel lifeless. But they said, put a photograph up of someone next to your screen. And this was way back in the day. This was when online education was being invented. So you got to go back to that era. But I did that, and I would see someone's face, like a friend. I would just put it up there next to my screen. I would smile at them, and I would imagine this isn't about me or the screen. This is about that next person. And so same thing when I'm shooting, I'm obviously I need to have a moment. It's about me and the person, but then it's about someone else. And I'm bringing someone else here. I'm searching for that something else, that someone else. And sometimes that can be a specific person, a mentor, because I know what a mentor would say about certain photographs. And I'm like, oh, right. If I were to, I think like, let's create a scenario, if you, Derek, and I were out somewhere and you said, Chris, go shoot these 5 photographs, and then I want you to show them to me in front of our 20 people, our class, then those 20 people would be in my mind, as would you, and that would change how I shoot. Potentially good or bad, right? Who knows? But it would affect it. My brain is allowing all of those people in. Now, I think the trick is most of us, what we're allowing in is a like on Instagram. And that like is probably, could be good, but we're probably giving it too much weight, because it's almost too quick of a response to an image. And I think the images that are the best have a quick and then a slow response, like a good song or good poem or something. You're like, that's good. Oh my gosh, that's really good. And not the quick hit is, we've seen them all. You're like, yeah, pretty picture. That's cool. And I shoot them, some of them I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then sometimes you have the quick hit, and then you have the image that maybe falls apart. Like, let's just go critical here for a second.
Great point. You got me thinking over here. Really great point.
So let's just say these two. Let's say if I'm critiquing these, I did not know what to do with this model, and
the quick hit on the right.
What's that?
The right, that's a quick hit.
Yeah, the right's a real quick hit. This one's a little bit like, she's leaning against the ladder. And then the more you look at it, at least for me, I'm like, it's okay, but just there's an oddness about it. This one, it lingers, but then the feeling is she's putting too much weight on this small, you don't know what it is, like beam or it's like she's leaning too heavily on something that's not comfortable, right? And so while you get a quick hit, and I think it's still good, what would have been better is the same kind of pose posture, but something supporting her weight more, if that makes sense. So if I were to like criticize this, I would say like the pole is just kind of weird. The
It's in
image still
space.
works. What's that?
It's in space. It's
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
see
It's
it
like in,
anchored.
yeah, yeah. But yet her emotion probably makes the image good enough to make it a keeper, but not like one of your best images of all time. Right. Um, so I think that's where it is. But then, I don't know why, not to belabor these kind of images, but these ones where let me just maybe go to this one. It's like, it's a curious, it's a slower, it's not a quick hit, but it's kind of like, huh. And then you're like, oh, okay, it works. And the hair, I think, works because it's blocking enough of this eye that you're not really seeing through. And the hands, they're enough. Or that one that this one, you see a little bit more of the eye. So that one, you probably has a quick and a slow. And then this one, I feel like is like, boom, wow. And then why, like it'd be interesting to hear someone talk about how do you reflect on this image. And again, if you hate this image, that's fine, but the whole point is really just thinking through how do we respond to imagery. And I did in post, I made her shoulders kind of drift away, and I lightened these creases on her sweater here, and I wanted to go for this thing where it's super high key, but yet there's still enough there, it's not too much. And that one could be interesting. Let me just see, what is the version of that file real quick? Or let me just open this one up in Photoshop, see if we have layers on it. If not, we can keep going. But really thinking through that, okay, so no one's going to be like, wow, Chris, this is your best, Photoshop work in the world. But we're just seeing, so this is kind of taking those lower shadows, bringing them up, and then there's some light on the face. Let's bring that up. I don't know how that translates on Zoom, but just like a little bit of the shadow lines there. That was just a little more contrast on the face. That was bringing back some eye color, so they were kind of too yellowed out. And then the last one was just a little bit more on the lips. So it's all pretty subtle. It's almost like sometimes, I guess I'm laughing because sometimes I'll show my before and after. Actually, I did some reshaping of the lips there, but I'll show my before and after in workshops or something. And some of my students will be like, that's it. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. It's like, but can I go nerdy here for a second?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So if we look at this lip right here, she wasn't wearing any lipstick. And then we kind of go to the end one, like having that more defined line all the way through. And then just under the lips, even though it's a real subtle little thing, which was that adjustment, what layer, I don't know. Okay, right there. That's important, and then even a couple little blips on the lip, because this image, the idea was to go super clean, super high key. And so all the little subtle stuff matters. And if it was more like casual, lifestyle-y backlight, who cares? Wouldn't need to do that much stuff to it. So
Subtlety's
yeah.
underrated. I think that's where, and this is completely off in the left field, but I think that's where I see,
Yeah.
when we critique images, how many images do we see that are a solid image, but then they get off in the weeds with the editing,
Right.
and they didn't need to. They had a good image, it just needed a little massaging, but they go off and they go
Right.
too drastic. And you can take a good
Right.
image and make it a not so
Right.
nice image.
You can. Here's one. I mean, just for the fun of it, this is the before image, and the thing that this is this place called Lucky Penny. It's a pizza shop. All these pennies on the wall, which I think are kind of fun. But you can see that what happened was I had too much space over there. So she was sort of orphaned over here. These are all sharp and in focus. Her eyes are as well, but the way that kind of fell, and then just in this case, cropping in, recentering her. So now when you look at this, I feel like you're like connected straight at her versus The other one, if I reset it again, you're kind of like hit the wall, then you hit her, then she's almost drifting away from you. She's like floating away. Um, where I like portraits where you're just like, boom, moment. Here it is. But to your point, I mean, I think I could go into the crop tool, kind of see the crop. It could go too far, whatever the post production is. Um, I'm trying to create a bad. What if someone was like, well, her head isn't straight. What if I tried to make her head straight, cropped into this or something? And now it kind of strangely works, but not as much for me. I mean, I think someone who kind of likes like angles and twists and turns, like maybe that works. But for me, I would prefer. I mean, I was trying to make a really bad crop, but that wasn't that bad of a crop.
We're gonna have a new series. We're gonna see if we can ruin your photos. See how long it
Yeah,
takes us
ruin
to
your photos.
try to ruin one of
Yeah,
your
well, I
photos.
think, yeah. I mean, we could ruin this one pretty easily. Just crop her fingers off, and then you're like, oh, okay, her fingers are cropped off, and that's, that went too far. Or, with our post production work that we're talking about, this one was very underexposed, and then you can see I brightened it and changed it, and even looking at it, I feel like the image probably has too much density. But then the question too is how much can you get away with sort of, that looks a little better, a little more, and it has too much color in it, man. I think I got too excited. You get too excited when you
I
do
think
post-production
I
work.
think it looks good. It looks good though. I feel like
Yeah,
a lot of the work you see, like the commercial fashion work, does kind of have that.
right.
It's like a punchier density to it than
Yeah,
what you might see in like in your normal work. But I like it.
yes,
It fits.
yes, which is different, say, than, just to compare it to one of these, which is more, I like shooting stuff like this a lot. Let me see if I can cancel this one out.
And which lens were you using for these?
Yeah, these were the 50.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are all that classic 50. And the thing, I think, the post production maybe is defined by the moment. Is it, what is the light, what is the look, what is the feel, and all those things as well. So I think, with this kind of conversation about these lenses, some people may be thinking like, okay, this is cool, but I really just want to do maybe travel stuff, because sometimes people think of this more as a travel setup. I think you can do that, and that's possibly why I was kind of showing this. I mean, you could get these little travel moments. You could get these. Let me just maybe grab a couple other images that feel just sort of, you're walking around seeing things or something like that. You could do all that stuff, but then you could also go in and, you could do some of this kind of stuff, some stuff where you're capturing these great moments with people. And so the versatility of that for me is just like, wow. Okay, I'm hooked. I'm in love. I'm not selling these. A friend of mine was like, well, could you sell one? Because you kind of have a 50 and a 40 and they're so close. And I'm like, no, because it's the only 40 I own. I've never owned a 40. 40 is such a weird focal length. I don't even know. I got to like play with it. I got to get to know it. I got to have fun with it. And again, I would go to a musician that has maybe a guitar with a different slightly shaped body or different slight material, but that allows for, I think, some fun playfulness. And so yeah.
It's funny. I always thought the same thing. 40 is like a weird focal length. Like, who uses a 40? And
Yeah,
I got one, and I'm like,
you did.
I loved it because I was always a
Tell me
28
what.
to 35, 28 to 35 shooter. And then I was never
Yeah.
really big into 50. And I'm like, you know what?
Okay.
It's funny. Then I started shooting a 40 more, and the 40 made me like 50, because then I'm like, you know what? I kind of like a little more
Mm,
reach than
yeah.
35. And look, we're talking a matter of millimeters here, but
Right.
you get this. Sometimes 5-10 millimeters is a huge difference. It doesn't sound like it is, but it's a huge difference when you go out, when you're the kind of photographer that I am, where you just go out and you're just shooting what you see. Sometimes a little more compression, or even in the opposite direction, a little more, having a little more access to the wider angle on things can make a huge difference.
Yeah. 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 And even just the and I can stop sharing here so we can maybe see our faces as we're getting closer to the ending, but is the, well, one, there's a question of like, how many lenses do we buy, right? There is a problem of having too many lenses. And a lot of students of mine have too many lenses. I have too many lenses. And so learning how to be disciplined with what you bring, why you bring it. So I'm not advocating for having so much gear that it's loading you down and you're not really shooting in the moment. So figuring out that right mix for you, but also figuring out how to do something, which I'm just going to say what you did is kind of mainstream, kind of typical, and something which isn't. And that can kind of free you up a little bit in whatever art form it is that you do. Maybe thinking of my mom, who's a painter, and she'll have this one really weird brush. It's like, it's old, it's horrible, but it gives her this one look, this one paintbrush. And just having that in addition to the other can be a fun combo. And so I think being open to that, and obviously you don't want to have so many combos that, what can you do? But I don't know about you, but do you remember back in more the film days when you would have these lenses with these just like personalities and the glass, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, this is a weird, broken, dusty, dirty lens, but it like allows me to do something I couldn't do with everything that's so perfect. And so I think even from a focal length and gear perspective, finding that equipment, if you hate Sony and hate these lenses, fine. But if you have a really big camera and you don't have a small camera, you need to fix that. Because that's something I think that's an important part of our experience as photographers, as the way that we see and experience and capture the world. And having that in your mix can really help out. Because I don't know about you. I mean, I'm going back to my tourist on the beach wearing nice clothes. What ends up happening to them all the time, Derek, is they start walking near the ocean, and then they don't really understand the waves, and the waves get their shoes and their pants wet, and then their shoes are full of water and they're kind of soggily. It's just so funny. And it warms my heart too, because I love that they're experiencing the elements. But back to, kind of this idea that being prepared for the moment, for the situation, and what clothing we have affects what we're able to do, and all of those things, is, I think, just what I realized as I was thinking about this is having this openness to what you have can be a benefit or a limitation. And if you're not feeling that yourself and you're listening, look around and watch other photographers. And the same way that I saw those photographers not dressed for the beach, I saw these dads. I don't know why, just happened to see like 4 or 5 dads with huge cameras with their family out in Santa Barbara. And they just had this massive camera, and it was so awkward and so bulky. It really limited their experience as a father with their family. And I guess I probably saw that because I've been that dad. And then I've also been the opposite, where I'm like, oh, I just have this little camera no one even knows. My kids don't even care if I'm a photographer. If they throw me a football, I can actually like catch it and handle my camera at the same time, and swing it on my back and play catch and go climb a tree or do whatever. And so if you're not a parent, this analogy doesn't work, but I think we get the gist of exploring, finding that right mix of gear that allows you to live and experience life in a fun way, and finding, I think part of that is what I would encourage everyone is finding a small kit. And I mean, it's if you're a big shooter, or other thing is if you have any kind of health issues, which I know a lot of photographers, as they get older or they have a knee replacement or hip replacement, man, this small equipment can just boom, save the day, because suddenly you can handle it and it can get you and keep you shooting. And so I think the big win is gear is so good now. The small gear out there, whatever brand it is so good. Explore it, because it can be a great way to keep going. Do you agree, disagree?
I totally
What
agree. You know what I think is something that we haven't talked about or maybe kind of, we haven't targeted this topic, but we've probably brushed along it, is even just looking at the focal lengths. We have 24, 40, and 50, right, for this trio.
Yeah.
Now, look, I was not in on the development of these lenses. I don't work for
Yeah.
Sony.
Yeah.
I don't know what
Yeah.
the brain
Right.
trust was thinking behind, developing this trio and why they decided to do 24, 40, and 50. But I love
Right.
it. I love the fact that when I look at 24 to 50 in that range, that's where life happens. You
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
like that's life happens between 24 to 50 for most people. And it's putting such a focus on the everyday things that we don't normally focus on. How many times do we get caught up in separating our subject from the background, and we focus more on what the bokeh looks like than what the subject looks like, or the super shallow depth of field? We learn to skate around having everything in focus because is it too much work to work with your environment and your background? And one of the keystones of my photography and when I teach people is pay attention to what's in the background. Not just environmental portraits should be the only thing where you pay attention to everything in the frame. It's beautiful having more in focus. And when you're dealing with a lens that's not a 1.2, that's not a 1.4, that's not a telephoto or portrait lens, you inherently have to worry about not just your subject, but every single piece of the frame because it all plays into that overall image of where your eye is drawn to, the aesthetic nature of that frame, of that image. So when you're shooting in 24, 40, and 50, you're getting that nice box of, you don't have the ability to zoom in and compress. You don't have that ability to go super wide and get that distorted fisheye effect. You're getting a very classic frame, a frame that a lot of us grew up on. Those of us who grew up back with film cameras, and you just had most people, it's like you had your 35 millimeter
Yeah.
SLR with a fixed 28 or 35 lens, or it was a 28 or 35
Or
lens, and that's
nifty
all you
50
had.
or something.
A nifty
Yeah.
50, and parents weren't running around with whole kits. Parents had one lens.
Yeah.
And for me, this is a classic return to making the snapshot a keystone of photography. And I love that. I love snapshot aesthetic. I love the ability to say, hey, you know what? Grab this, swing it over your shoulder, and let's go. Let's not pack a camera bag. How many times do you get stressed out, Chris, when you're going somewhere and you have to start thinking what you're going to leave and what you're going to bring and what size bag are you going to bring based on how much gear you're going to bring?
Yeah.
I
And then
love
also
the
how many extra batteries am I going to bring and extra cards? And when I did all those shoots, full day, I guess they weren't full day shoots. Maybe each of them was a kind of a half day. I just had one, I had nothing. I had the battery and the camera and the card in it. And yeah, it was this no worries kind of thing, like you're saying. So yes,
That's
I'm
it.
with you.
So I guess I'll kind of wrap it up there, with my thoughts in saying that I love that. I love that, and again, whether was intentional or not, I'm guessing it was intentional, knowing, you know, Sony's a big brand. They know what they're doing, and I
Yeah.
love this approach, getting back to taking pictures of everything, taking pictures of everyday things, taking pictures of what what you love, what's around you, your everyday world. That's where the power of photography is. Trends come and go, but you're always going to look at family pictures. I tell people all the time, you can take moody, the most moody, cool looking silhouette, black and white, foggy rain image that on Instagram would get 10,000 likes. 30 years from now, that snapshot of you and your brother
Yeah.
as kids that your mother took, and it's out of focus, and she's has horrible light, the whole right side of the picture is blown out. That image is going to mean way more to you 50 years from now than your moody Instagram picture with 10,000 likes. So I'm going to leave it right there. I'm going to kick it back to you. We
Yeah.
did have one comment. Harry Lee
Yeah.
joining us on Zoom says, hey Chris, great to see you on this platform. uh Lose the natural light touch, thanks. I don't, I don't know if that
Wait,
was a
what's that? Sorry.
suggestion or so Harry, I don't know if that was a suggestion or a comment. Let me know so
Maybe
we can relay
saying
that to
saying
Chris.
use more studio lights or something.
I
Um, But I would just add to a couple other thoughts. I mean, I love how you put it. One is also these kind of lenses and this kind of gear is very affordable. So that's a nice thing about it. And the thing we didn't talk about is, well, why not use your smartphone if we want to go small and that. And I thought about that a lot because I think smartphones are amazing, and I have an iPhone 13 Pro Max, and I love that, and I shoot with it all the time. It's a different experience though when you have a camera that you can hold up to an eye and you can block out the world versus if it's bright and sunny out and I'm shooting with this, even though the screen's really bright, I can't quite see what I'm shooting. So the from an experiential and kind of creative point of view, is one better or worse? That's almost irrelevant. But do I really enjoy, either I can look at the back, I can do that, but do I really enjoy when I have the moment to do this? Or if I want to get that up close portrait, if I just want to get life as it happens, kind of snapshotty, I can do that. But then in addition, which I couldn't do with my iPhone, I couldn't capture those portraits that I did. There's no way. It would have been impossible. I couldn't have intentionally exposed a certain way thinking about post-production in mind, because the dynamic range is not as flexible or as good. So I think from the experience side, you get these smaller cameras where you have this best of both worlds. And on top of that, just to reiterate what you're saying, they're very limiting. You'll go out with one focal length, and the limit of that, just it's pleasant. It's you just say, okay, here I am. This is what I got. Let me move my body. Let me change my camera height. Let me engage the scene. What matters in the scene? Why does it matter? And all of those things. So
Love it. Dude, we could literally go on.
we could.
We can we
We
can
should. We
start
should just
with
create.
anything. We'll just
Yeah,
we'll just live stream 24 hours a day. There we go. We're just
we will. We will. We will create more clutter and noise in the world, whether people like it or not.
no,
With the intent of trying to simplify it. No.
it still holds true. I tell you, every time we have you on, I'm like, I log off and I always have to check my watch that reads my heart
Yeah,
rate.
me
And I'm
too.
like, every time I get back off these calls with you, I'm like, my heart rate has dropped like 15 beats per minute. Oh, there we go. All right, Harry. Harry, I'm sorry. Harry clarified there. Loves the natural light touch. He meant to say love
Okay.
instead of lose. He
Okay.
said
Okay.
he met you at the Tanque Verde workshop. Hope to see you live
Okay.
again.
Oh, that was amazing. That was amazing. Roberto Valenzuela's put together. What a workshop. Oh my gosh, that was phenomenal. But yes. Yeah, and maybe just to pick up on that. And it's fine too, either way, if people like our style as photographers or not, right? I mean, that's what makes it interesting. And it's important to have friends that have different style than you. Let's say Roberto Valenzuela is a good point. Like, he and I shoot very differently, but we're really close friends, and I learn from him, and maybe he learns from me or whatever. But just to play off the natural light comment a little bit, is all the photographs that I showed shot in this setup are natural light, meaning it's just you and a camera and a lens, and that's the beauty of it. And getting back to that simplicity, and sometimes that can be really revitalizing as well. I know, I mean, there's plenty of famous photographers that, let's say Annie Leibovitz, once a year gets a small camera and just goes and shoots. No lights, no sets, no crews, no nothing. And there's a reason for that. It keeps you humble, keeps you hungry, makes you have to really slow down. You can't, like you were saying, rely on the wow factor of certain things like the super wide or the big light or whatever. And that's a good thing. I almost think maybe it's like it would be like a famous chef. Let's say there's some famous chef that grew up in Mexico and they have the best ingredients in the world, but then once a year they go back to their little village and just cook with like what their grandma has in the garden and whatever, and it's like, get back to the core ingredients or something. So that's what it is for me. But Derek, so good to talk, man. And thank you everyone for joining us. And if anyone has any thoughts or questions, I know I have one friend who was going to tune in, but she has a little one, so I don't know if she made it or not. But if anyone has questions, didn't catch any of this, just reach out to me on Instagram. Happy to field questions or help out in any way I can.
Definitely, Chris. Always great chat. And huge thank you to you, of course, for sharing your time and enlightenment with us. Sony, huge thank you to our sponsor for today's events, plural. So huge thank you. And of course, to all of our viewers, we do it for you. Can't do it without you. We love getting the comments in. So likewise, let us know who you'd love to see on the channel, what you'd love to see on the channel. We take all questions, comments, and critiques with a smile. But that's all we have for today. Another rendition of the B&H virtual event space is in the books. Catch y'all next time.